Hello, everybody. Welcome back. This is a BSJ little educational tidbit. Today, we're going to be talking about another bad lane matchup and ways that you can win them, and things to think about during the lane. I think this is just something that I've learned a lot about recently, maybe the last year or so, and it's really important to see how it's applied and seeing what happens when the opponent doesn't properly play around it.
Banana slam jam.
So this is a lane where I'm anti-mage against Slardar. In the core matchup, it's pretty bad. This is a really bad core-to-core matchup. And if you don't know that, just kind of play it a few times and you'll understand. So basically what happens in this lane is I envision that if I try to ever hit the Slardar, he'll stun me, he'll bash me, Mirana's going to hit me, and I'll take a lot of damage. And there's really no amount of sustain that anti-mage can buy where that will work. So I've realized that anti-mage can't fight these heroes when they're together. But since I'm an anti-mage, I can capitalize on when they're apart. And it's really important that I do that. Because even though Slardar doesn't mind having no mana, he does need mana if he ever wants to set up something for the Mirana. And he also still benefits slightly from having the mana. So it's really important that early on in the lane, I prioritize catching them when they're apart. Because that is, if I let the lane play normally, where I just go for CS and I play passively, I will eventually get bullied away by the Slardar. And the fact is, kills benefit us in this lane. Like, if kills go back and forth, as long as I'm not missing too much CS. So first, I want to talk about that. So if you watch this lane, we're going to play hyper passive in the early parts of the lane. We're going to defensively creep aggro. We want absolutely nothing to do with the opponent heroes. We're going to hit the range creep anytime Slardar walks away from it. This is a mistake by him, because if I'm Slardar against anti-mage, I always want to, or against most melee heroes, I always want to threaten the range creep. I always want to make sure I'm ready to punish any carry that walks up to this, and if they go for it, they get hit. And instead, he walks away, so I hit the range creep twice to get away from him. Notice how he tried to walk back and punish me, but it was already too late. Same thing here. Same thing on that range creep. Notice how my entire maneuvers, whether it's CSing or creep aggro, or have all been evasive of the Slardar. And now is a crucial moment that I saw Nico Baby talk a lot about as a carry player, and anything in the side lanes. You could be an off laner doing this too. And this is capitalizing on your level 2 timings. So first and foremost, I talked about the dynamics behind what it takes to win the lane as anti-mage versus Slardar Mirana. And when I say not necessarily win, but if there's a moment we are the most favored, this would be the one. And this is what I mean by sometimes if you play optimally in a countered matchup, you'll beat people who play suboptimally in a matchup where they're favored. So in this example, I talked about how we benefit when we fight the two heroes separated. So I told my silencer, hey, I'm going to get level 2 off of this melee creep, and I'm going to blink on the Mirana. Be ready. Because I know Slardar is not level 2 yet to help him. I know Slardar leveled Bash, and he's in no position to help the Mirana. And since Mirana is still not level 2 yet, and he's only 290 move speed, I can just blink on him and hit him at least 3 or 4 times. And that's something that if you capitalize on these little moments of strength, it pays off a lot as the lane goes forward. And you're going to see that I have this exact idea. And I told my silencer to be ready. And he actually went for the pull, and I thought if he was a bit more ready, because he has Glaives as well as Curse, it would have been even better. But notice how we bully him away, bully the Mirana away, which is further preventing the opponent from hitting us with 2 heroes. Because that's how you lose this lane, and that's how they want the lane to be played. So notice how every time I go for a kill or whatever aggressive play, I'm trying to keep the lane back as much as possible. Then I knew the Mirana needed to regen a little bit, so I was willing to trade with the Slardar. I knew the Mirana was going to take like 5-10 seconds to get back into the lane. So notice how I traded with Slardar here. That was intentional. Made him use stun, burn most of his mana. And since the silencer was pulling, I knew I was good to just buy some time, and then I could use some regen and just CS underneath my tower. And this is an example where I'm very confident with how I'm supposed to play this lane. And I'm very confident about how they win this lane, because I've played both sides of this matchup. And it's just showing that as long as I avoid both of them hitting me at once, then it will go to our benefit. In this case, I end up tanking the arrow for silencer. We have this back and forth battle. All of this has been... Imagine how close this would be if we... or imagine how close he would have been to surviving, or maybe he gets away on Slardar if the lane hadn't been going as well as it had. Maybe we hadn't taken that early engagement just now. I do end up dying to the Mirana, but that's just lack of knowledge of anti-mage as a hero. But this just shows at the start of the lane how important it is to be able to get off to a good start, theory crafting exactly how the opponent lane benefits them, and how it, like what you can do to maybe capitalize on their weaknesses. Our level 2 timing was really good. Them splitting up was always weak on their part. And anytime Mirana was away from the Slardar, we made sure we hit him. Notice I'm also going for double Wraithband because I'm expecting to take a lot of right-click harass in this lane. And then I'm also building to leave the lane as soon as possible, which means I ended up going for a Mask of Madness because that's the item that lets me jungle. So this is the entire vision of the lane, because even though I end up I still end up getting booted away from this lane because Slardar bullies Anti-Mage very naturally. He's just going to hit you a lot. Eventually he gets his level 6 and you don't want to lane anymore. So not only did I weather the storm, I had this early start where I was able to get off to a much better start than I would ideally think I would get. I was willing to give up CS because my entire point is to get out of this lane without being crippled. And then I bought items that were with the intent to survive the lane with the 2 Wraith Bands and then jungle with the Mask of Menace. So I hope you guys learned a little bit about how to think about some bad matchups as carry. These are crucial factors that can be thought about in almost any matchup. These specific ones allowed me to win this matchup, or at least do way better than I should have. And in the future, and maybe you'll notice a game where this pays off for you too. In the second example here, we have Spectre versus Viper. It's another bad lane matchup, and we're going to talk about it the same way we talked about Anti-Mage versus Slardar Mirana. So we've got Tusk Viper against us, and so if you aren't aware, Viper's passive breaks my dispersion, and also Viper's really good against any hero that can't remove his poison attack. So this is another lane where we are hard countered, and we also suck in a 2v2 setting because of tag team from Tusk and the fact that we're in a bad carry to off lane matchup. So the same idea applies. What items do we need to deal with the strength of the opponent lane, and how do we have to build to get out of here as soon as possible? So in the Anti-Mage game, we built double Wraithband because there's a lot of right-click damage being taken and a lot of trading going on. In this lane, we're going to be taking a lot of harass from the Viper Q as well as the Viper W. So we go for the double Ring of Regen. And on Anti-Mage, the jungling item early is a Mask of Madness, at least this patch. And on Spectre, the early jungling item is Blade Mail. So in the previous game, we built what items we needed to survive the laning stage. And in this lane, we're doing the exact same thing. Which in this case, it's the double Ring of Regen. Much cheaper items, but nonetheless the same concept. So notice how we're going to play super far back against the Viper, always defensively creep aggroing. We're going to accept that we don't get very much CS, at least compared to normal, because the lane is unfavorable. And notice how, because of this matchup, the one thing we are concerned about is that he pushes it constantly into our tower and is going to farm the big camp with Tusk pulling it. So we're ready for that. As long as we stay away from Tusk Viper at the same time, just like in the Slardar Mirana matchup, then we are fine. So notice how all of my pathing will be to the left side of Tusk here, because Viper's on the right side. If I were to ever go on Viper, it's because I know Tusk is gone. So as you see here, I'm purposely actually aggroing these creeps away from the Viper as to further that concept. And as long as Tusk is over there, I'm fine to be here. Notice how as long as I stay away from both of them at the same time, I am perfectly fine to be here. So notice what happens is Tusk expects to be able to kill me here, and I realize that he's out of position, he's overextending. Both Snapfire and I are level 2, and Tusk is level 1. So similar to that Anti-Mage game, we're going to capitalize on the fact that we're level 2 and they're not, because Snapfire has both of her spells and Tusk does not, and we end up getting the kill. The biggest thing about these bad lanes, Slardar, Viper, offlaners that punish you if you walk up into lane. I want you to think about if I was against Slardar or against Viper, and I walk up to here in lane. I'm just going to take a ton of damage from slows and stuns, and I'm going to get chased all the way back to my tower, potentially just dying full to 0. So this is a lane where it's intolerable and unmanageable if the lane's ever this far up. So as opposed to ever walking up that far, we have to realize that if the lane's pushed, we have to do something about it. And the fact is, Viper is going to be near the creep wave at all times, because that's what he wants to be doing. So we're constantly threatening pulls. We're constantly defensively creep aggroing. We're accepting the missing of CS. And now we're going to pull the lane again. We're trying again. We're not even going up, because we know this area is bad for us. So Viper's nice enough to push it back into us. If he decided to static the lane, then we would have just pulled, and me and Snapfire together can stop the Tusk from stopping us, or prevent the Tusk from stopping us. And right there, my Snapfire actually made a big mistake, because as long as Viper's pushing the lane back into us, we're content with whatever's happening in the game. He felt pressured to go contest the lane, while we don't have to, because Viper was already pushing it back in for us. So we're just going to keep defensively creep aggroing. As long as lane's near tower, we're chilling. Still not getting that greatest CS, and we expect that. But the same idea as the anti-mage game. As long as we're getting some kills and we're not feeding, then the game is whatever. And we're going to farm entirely around this big camp. And notice how Tuss is going to go check the 4-minute rune. We killed that creep as fast as possible before Viper got back. And we're just not going to lane. Because we can't. We simply cannot lane. So we actually pull the hard camp ourselves. And make sure we get this extra bit of CS. And as long as we know we can't walk up in the lane, we'll play the lane properly. And notice how all of it revolves around not fighting Tusk and Viper at the same time. And not fighting them in a situation in the lane that we are not strong. Which is all the way back here. And the fact is, they just can't stop you from doing everything. If I'm over here and Tusk is contesting me, potentially Snapfire is going to pull. Now, if you're in a lane where your support's not working with you, that's just kind of how it is. Because if the opponent's playing properly and you're not, you're going to get even more fucked in lane than you should. So in this type of game, we end up getting a 6.5-minute blade mail. And we just dip. We are out of lane. This is the item that allows us to jungle. Dispersion's the ability that helps us jungle, so we max that out first. And we know our hero scales poorly against Viper. The same as Anti-Mage versus Slardar. So because of that, we're not even attempting to stay in lane. It's completely inefficient for us to stay in lane. The thing about Slardar Viper is they're both lane dominators that apply very little pressure on our tower. So not only do we just have to survive the lane, but we can absolutely just leave the lane with no intention of really coming back to defend our tower, because those heroes don't actually kill the tower. Yes, Viper has wave clear, and yes, Slardar has decent right click, but neither of them push towers with any amount of speed compared to a lot of other offlaners. So we feel no pressure to come back, and we just ditch the lane with a survivable, manageable amount of farm. And this is always going to be better than trying to overextend feeding or anything like that.
If you liked this video, please like, comment, subscribe to the YouTube channel, all that shenanigans, because at the end of the day, YouTube does care about that. You may not care about it, I may not care about it, but the YouTube algorithm does.
Thank you guys.
So
appreciate it.
please do.